Hey friends, it's Jack again. Here's part 2 of this week's March Madness video as promised. So yeah, I wanted to split this into 2 parts because I'm just going to get a little long-winded here, and I didn't want the message of the previous video to get lost in the mix. There's just been a lot of questions about what March Madness is, what our process is, what we've been experiencing in past years and this year as well. So I just kind of want to go over all that and shed some light. So we are moving into the 3rd week of our process, and we're still in the round of 64. We taste 16 wines each week in 8 blind pairs. So it takes us 4 weeks of tasting 16 wines each week to get through the first round of 64. Each pair that goes against each other, one gets eliminated, one moves on to the next round. So after we've done all 4 weeks of tasting all 64 wines in 32 pairs, there are 32 winners, and they move on into the bracket. Those 32 then get retasted against each other. So all the winners are going against each other in the second round. It takes us 2 weeks, 16 wines each week, to get through the round of 32. And then there's a Sweet 16. And then the following week, we do the Elite 8, the Final 4, and then the championship round. So that's the format. Now, I get a lot of questions about, how do you decide, number one, what wines to put in the bracket? A very valid question, and one that I don't have a concise answer for. But I've been tasting and exploring Oregon wines for 15 years now, and I feel like I have a pretty extensive experience level on what Oregon wine essentially is, and who out there are making essential expressions of this wine. Now, I don't want anyone, if you're watching this and you have a winery or you represent a winery who has never appeared in the bracket, my apologies up front. It's nothing against you personally. It's just a simple matter of mathematics. We can only do 64 each year, and we're up to like almost 600 wineries in the Willamette Valley. So I would just say, if you are feeling left out, by all means, feel free to reach out to me personally and say, hey, we would love to be included in the bracket, because part of this is me curating and making those decisions. But part of me is also just wants to turn this into a more democratic thing. And honestly, it's the wineries that show the most willingness to participate, or at least, put one foot forward and say, hey, yeah, we're part of this. Maybe mention it on their socials or in their emails or what have you. Just like the more help I get just getting the word out about this series, the more helpful it is. So I'm more inclined to go with wineries that do that. Also, I really want to make sure that the iconic wineries are represented well. So we've had Eyrie every year, naturally, Elk Cove. This year, I made it a point to also add in Penner-Ash, Ponzi, Chehalem, some of these real old legacy producers that I just want to make sure that are represented in the spectrum of what Oregon wine is. Bethel Heights also comes to mind. Just the legacy producers is how I like to call it. And then I also want to make sure there's room for newer wineries, up and comers, ones that have really, made a splash in recent years with forward-thinking winemaking or approaches to how their business is structured. There's a lot of interesting different takes on Oregon wine in the Valley, and I love to make sure that there's a spectrum of that in the bracket as well. So that's the selection process. And then the next question I often get is, how do you decide where to put people in the bracket? How do you decide how to match them up? And there's no scientific approach to this, but what I often wind up doing is, because these are always like current release, very young wines. And these are often very structured wines too. So these are wines that need to be opened, and they need to breathe and get aired out a little bit before we serve them. So what I do is I open all 16 wines that we're going to taste on each Friday. I open them the day before, Thursday afternoon, so about 24 hours prior. And I take about an ounce out of each bottle, which gives it a little more headspace, a little more breathing room, and stick the cork back in. Then I sit there with those 16 samples, and I first kind of visually assess them. A lot of times you can make decisions just based on the color. But then I swirl and sniff and taste all 16, and I kind of keep my notes. And I eventually wind up just putting wines of a similar weight category together, if that makes sense. So if there are two particularly light wines in that crop, I'll put them up against each other. And conversely, if there's two that are particularly dark, bold, structured, or whatever, I'll put those together. So I'm trying to match up, stylistically and weight class. But that's not always the end of it, because then I also want to look at like who is behind the wine, where did the wine come from, and I don't want to overstack certain parameters, right? So like if there's two wines, for instance, last week there were actually three wines that were related to Tom Fitzpatrick. There was his own label, the Elevée Vineyard, the label that he is the head winemaker for, Aloro, and the Penner Ash wine that I put into the bracket was the Elevée Vineyard Pinot Noir. So Tom had his hands in all three of those wines, and I didn't want to put them together because I just wanted to see how each one performed on their own. And by the way, all three made it through. So that says a lot about Tom, and shout out to Tom Fitzpatrick, one of the best winemakers in the Valley, I think. But so, yeah, that's a little bit of insight into how it gets put together. What I don't do, and this is a question that comes up, I do not seed them, right? Like, so in NCAA basketball brackets, there's a seeding process, and you figure out who's the number one, the most likely to get to the finale, and then you make them go up against number 16 in the first round, the least likely. And there's elimination that way. And I do not attempt to seed because, for one thing, I've had my preconceived notions about certain wineries kind of blown out the water from this process. So wineries that I thought were forgettable or not worthy of a closer look, turns out they are, and I would have never known if we hadn't blind tasted them together with something that I know and love very intimately in the bracket. So this is all part of the learning experience. So that's insight on the selection process and the building of the bracket. Now, I wanted to go into a little bit about what we've experienced thus far. We have done, like I said, we've done 2 weeks of 16 wines each thus far. And so we're halfway through the round of 64. We've tasted 32 wines. And we've already there's already some storylines here to share with you. So I'm going to tell you, first of all, this is how I file all the ballots, by the way. This is 41 ballots from that first week, which was an amazing turnout. Thank you for everyone who came down and participated in that. So one of the biggest stories, if you haven't already heard, is that, last year's winner was Perkins Harder. Her estate, Bracken Vineyard, was like sort of the dark horse unknown winery that took it all, which was such a special and fun story, fun to watch. But I put her up against a wine that, you know, I didn't know. I've never experienced before. So I was like, all right, if I'm going to put this wine in and give it a shot in the bracket, I'm going to make it, earn its keep. And sure enough, it did. So this year I put the Perkins Harder Bracken Vineyard Pinot up against Meliora, which I've been asking people about this, and very few have heard about it. But this is Alex Fortson's new label, and I got to tell you, it's gorgeous. As soon as I tasted it with him, he brought some samples in, and I was just like, oh my god, these are fantastic! Congratulations! Let's put some of these in the bracket and see how they do. I have to tell you, not only did it knock out the previous year's winner, the defending champion, it was by far the largest margin of win. So a lot of and it's amazing how like a lot of the votes get pretty close to 50%, like 60-40 would be even an unusually large gap. So I'm looking at vote totals from the first week, and it's like 22-19, 21-20. 24-17, 23-18. So all within a few votes, And then Meliora versus Perkins Harder, 31-10. And I can tell you, it's not because all of a sudden the Perkins Harder is not a good wine. It is a good wine. But it just didn't have that X factor. I think that the 22 did, which is fine. It's still a lovely, very worthy wine to search out. But the Meliora did have that. It was like the roles were reversed, and the Meliora had like that je ne sais quoi, just a lovely, lovely wine. I was also tasting our first year's winner in the same week. That was Walter Scott, and Walter Scott did win. It beat Granville 21-20, a very close, razor thin margin there. Granville, of course, one of my personal favorites. I got to give a little shout out to Granville because I really love them. I love their wines. I think they're really worthy wines. But they've been in the bracket 3 years now and still have not gotten out of the first round. And I'm cracking up because it's just like there's no justice in this bracket. It's just the cold hard truth. And the cold hard truth really is not that Granville isn't a good wine. It's just that they tend to make a structured wine that is intended to get laid down, and it just isn't going to show well up against some of these other like more ready to drink styles. So maybe someday I'll do I'll see if I can put together a bracket of all like Oregon Pinots that are 5, 6, 7 years old. It would be a Herculean effort to get 64 wineries who actually have enough stock from a 6 or 7 year old vintage to put forward for a bracket. But I don't know. Maybe I'll just have to stash away all that wine someday. We'll see. It'd be a big initial investment. What else did we see? My wine of the night the first week was Crowley. Their La Colina Vineyard, Dundee Hills Pinot Noir was absolutely spectacular, as I have to give a shout out to Crowley. The first year, the runner-up was Stephen Goff, and we tasted that in the first week, and that one beat Hopewell, the Strings Eola Hills Pinot Noir. A $55 bottle, by the way, beating a $100 bottle. So that's another aspect of like of the value of blind tasting. It's so revealing once you strip away all your preconceived notions and just get down to the root of what's a good wine. So the $55 bottle beating the $100 bottle is just superb. What else do we have? 100 Suns over Longolo. The Hundred Suns was just really plush and bright and beautiful. Holocene over Lingua Franca, that was a little bit of a surprise, especially for me. The Holocene to me was a little, how you want to say, underripe. It was kind of green and a little stemmy, sort of minty, strangely. But then the Lingua Franca, I have to admit, was a little wonky. It was just not really put together yet. And again, both of these things might be just youthfulness in the wine. But for me, that was a surprising one. Elk Cove over Cameron, that was a pretty big surprise. Of course, Cameron, a perennial favorite, a wine that a lot of people are aware of and seek out and collect. But the Elk Cove Mount Richmond beating that out. Those were two wines that were equally priced at $70. Rose Rock over the RR Ridgecrest Reserve. That was a little bit of a bummer for me. I really, really loved that RR. It was like this close to being my wine of the night. It was like between Crowley and RR for me. But there is a real supple attractiveness to that Rose Rock, and I'm not saying it wasn't worthy of taking that matchup, but I just wish they both could have gone through. I should have put the two of them up against other wines, because it's a shame that one of them had to go. So yeah, that's the wrap up for the first week, and then I'll go over the second week, what we just tasted this last Friday. Were there any surprises? Well, I already mentioned the biggest surprise, which was that 3 of the 8 wines were related to Tom Fitzpatrick. His the Aloro, the Penner-Ash, and the Elevate, all 3 wines that he either made or he grew the fruit for, or both. And all 3 won their matchups. They beat the Aloro beat Adelsheim, Winderley Vineyard. The Elevate beat Ambar. That was a little bit of a surprise, because Ambar did so well last year. That was its first year in the bracket, and I do believe it made it into the Elite 8, and everybody loved it. It was like a very well received wine. So not getting out of the first round this year. That's all right. It's a brutal smackdown. Beaufrere winning in the first round for the first time, if I'm not mistaken. And it beat Anderson Family Vineyard, their estate Pinot Noir. Patty Green, also another first time winner for in the first round, and I've had that in all 3 years, because that's a perennial favorite of mine, and I kept wanting to, like, we were trying different cuvées each year to see which one would connect with the public, and this year it's the Durant Vineyard Bishop Block from Dundee Hills, and that did well. It beat Compris, which was another wine that did very well in previous years. So a little bit of a turn of the tables there. My wine of the night this year, or this week, was Penner-Ash, which that one kind of blew me away. Penner-Ash is a more established, larger winery, obviously one that's been around for a long time, and Lynn Penner-Ash is a major part of Willamette Valley wine lore and history. But, that's a winery that was sold some years ago to Jackson Family. And, to say that the coming of Jackson Family to the Willamette Valley was met with suspicion is a major understatement. But I think in a lot of ways they've proven themselves as worthy neighbors. They've, for the most part, maintained the integrity of the wineries that they've acquired. They've maintained the integrity of the agriculture that they practice. The business that they conduct in the valley. I mean, I don't know. I have never had to work directly with them, so some of you might have different opinions on the matter, but I've never heard anyone complain about the big guys in town, trying to like bowl over the little guys or anything like that. It seems like they've put a lot of effort into integrating into the community, as opposed to trying to come in and like repaint it, So props to them. And the Penner-Ash Elevate Vineyard Pinot Noir was lovely. It beat Rex Hill, their Two Mules Vineyard, which was another really nice wine. And again, I was kind of sad that one of them had to leave. They were both really, really good. Another legacy producer, Chehalem, beating out Bethel Heights. Colleen Clemens. So I mentioned last week or the previous week that Stephen Goff had won, and that Stephen had also been the runner-up in our first year. And basically, every time we encounter a wine by Stephen Goff, we just fall in love with it. He is a master winemaker. Sorry, Steve, I don't want to butter your bread too much, but it's just, I'm blown away. Every single wine that comes across our table by Steve is another beauty, another home run. Absolutely love his style. The Colleen Clemens Victoria was up against Woodshed, which was a Final Four wine last year. And it slaughtered. It was by far the biggest margin of victory. 14-4 was the final vote on that. No other vote was anywhere near that, wide. And it also got the most wine of the night votes. We ask people when they sit down to do the flight, obviously compare each pair and vote for the one you like better, but also let us know what your favorite of all 16 wines was. And the Colleen Clemens Victoria got the most votes for wine of the night. So just a beauty. And then Nicholas J. over newcomer Roshni Vineyard, an estate vineyard in McMinnville. And I've had the pleasure of meeting the proprietors of that label. And I just want to say, like, that was an amazing wine. Did it get beat by Nicholas J? Yes, almost predictably, just because Nicholas J makes stunning world-class wines. And their submission was a $75 bottle of wine, while the Roshni estate is just $30. Not to say that that's a guaranteed indicator of what the result is going to be. We've had $35 wines beat $100 wines in the bracket before. But it was up against a different class of wine, and I thought it really held up to it. I mean, it was the only $30 wine in the tasting that week. Other wines going up to $100, $120, many of them in the $70, $80 range. And it didn't stand out as like a lesser wine. I taste these blind just like everyone else, and I knew that there was a $30 wine in there somewhere, and I was like, I can't pick it out, So that says a lot about the quality of that wine. So definitely one worth checking out, Roshni. So yeah, I think that's about it. I know this was a long one, but thanks for hanging through it. But as mentioned in the previous video, we'll be doing round 3 of the round of 64 this Friday, February 6th. Official start time is 5 p.m., but like I'm telling folks, if you need to get here earlier, it's totally fine. We're open till 9, but we ask that people start their brackets by 8. So call it 5 to 8 as sort of the window of when the tasting's going down. And refer to the other video if you haven't already for a full breakdown of all the wines that are going to be in the running this week. Okay. Thanks again. We'll see you guys soon. Cheers.